What happens when the youngest White House press secretary, a devoted Catholic, walks into the most liberal talk show in America right after the Pope's death? Let's just say, sparks fly. Comment where you're watching from and hit subscribe so you don't miss powerful stories like this one. At just 27 years old, Karoline Leavitt has made history as the youngest White House press secretary. A committed Catholic and a staunch supporter of President Donald Trump, Leavitt grew up in a faith-centered environment that shaped her into a firm, conservative voice. She strongly upholds the values of family, faith, and national security. Today, she prepares to walk into a tense exchange on The View, a platform known for challenging conservative guests. But this time, emotions are running even higher. The topic? The recent passing of Pope Francis, a global religious leader beloved by millions. The set beams under bright studio lights. The crowd, ranging from loyal fans to skeptical viewers, responds with loud applause. Sitting across from her are the show's well-known liberal hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar, Sunny Hostin, and Sarah Haynes. Their polished smiles conceal pointed questions, ready to spark confrontation. Known for their tough interviews and progressive views, the hosts now focus their attention on Leavitt. She represents not only Trump's administration, but also the Catholic values that many believe the Pope symbolized. Pope Francis's death stirred emotions worldwide, especially for his support of immigrants and his emphasis on compassion and justice. But when The View faces backlash for seemingly mocking the Pope's death, Leavitt decides to speak out. Equipped with confidence, conviction, and a sharp command of language, she's not just defending her political beliefs. She's standing up for her faith in the Pope's enduring message. As she steps on stage, her light pink suit reflects both youth and seriousness. Her expression is focused, a mix of alertness and strength. She knows the original topic of discussion was meant to be Trump's policies, border control, trade, and more. But the moment suggests something deeper, even confrontational. Leavitt suspects that the Pope's legacy might be used against her, turning faith into fuel for criticism. The opening theme plays. The audience applauds once more. Whoopi Goldberg starts the conversation. Her voice is calm but calculated. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're joined by Karoline Leavitt, the youngest press secretary in U.S. history. She pauses, giving Leavitt a measured glance. We'll get to Trump's policies, but first something important, the passing of Pope Francis. A hush falls over the audience. A few heads nod quietly. Leavitt stays composed, one hand resting calmly on her chair. Joy Behar leans in with a pointed smile. Karoline, you're Catholic, right? Pope Francis just passed away. He often spoke about social justice, about immigrants. But honestly, do Americans even care? He's in the Vatican, thousands of miles away. The crowd chuckles. Leavitt doesn't blink. She answers steadily. Joy, if we're going to talk about the Pope, let's do so with respect. He just passed. And millions of Americans are praying right now. He wasn't just a leader in the Vatican. He was a symbol of compassion that reached across borders, touching lives everywhere. The audience claps softly. Behar raises an eyebrow, caught off guard by Leavitt's steady confidence. Sunny Hostin jumps in, her tone sharp but composed. Karoline, Pope Francis often criticized strict immigration policies, like Trump's border wall. As a practicing Catholic, how do you reconcile that? Does your faith ever feel conflicted? The question is designed to put Leavitt on the defensive, but she doesn't hesitate. With a calm smile and eyes full of determination, she responds, Sonny, the Pope preached compassion, and President Trump puts it into practice. Strong borders protect communities, create jobs, and help those in need. My faith doesn't falter. It guides every decision I make. The crowd murmurs. Some, not in agreement. Hostin leans back, her smile forced. Whoopi jumps in, her tone subtly dismissive. Karoline, your words sound nice, but let's look at reality. The Pope represented unity and care. Trump, on the other hand, cut welfare, and pushed economic policies that hurt the vulnerable. Can you really say their goals align? She tilts her head, expecting hesitation. Leavitt fires back, cool but pointed. Maybe it's time to check those facts, Whoopi. Under Trump, millions of jobs were created. That's not just policy. That's lifting people out of poverty. That's real social justice. The Pope inspired action, and we turned that into results. If you think he was irrelevant, tell that to the millions who were inspired by him. The audience laughs and claps. Whoopi pauses, clearly caught off guard by the confident rebuttal. Joy Behar isn't done. Her voice rises. Karoline, let's be honest. The Pope is gone, and probably nothing changes. He talked about climate change, but Americans care more about gas prices and jobs. He was idealistic, not realistic. Don't you think so? The comment lands hard, an attempt to downplay the Pope's legacy. Leavitt takes a steady breath, her gaze sharp. Joy, mocking someone who just passed, someone who devoted his life to faith and service, is deeply disrespectful. The Pope didn't just speak, he acted. He reformed the Vatican, gave hope to the poor. If that's idealism, it's the kind we need more of. Millions are mourning him for a reason. The audience erupts in applause. A few stand. Behar goes quiet, her smile dimming. Sarah Haynes steps in to ease the tension. Karoline, we're just trying to understand. You're a Catholic working in an administration with different values than the Pope's. Do you ever stop to ask yourself, where is your faith leading you? Leavitt leans forward, calm and clear. Sarah, my faith leads me to act with purpose. Trump builds a strong America, jobs, safety, responsibility. That's how I live my faith. Not by doubting it, but by living it. Applause follows. Haynes nods, but her expression remains unsettled. Sunny tries again, this time with a sharper edge. But Karoline, the Pope preached unity. Trump's words and policies have been divisive. Doesn't that conflict with the Church's teachings? Leavitt answers instantly. Sunny, unity doesn't mean ignoring reality. Trump fights for the people who've been forgotten. Workers, farmers, families. The Pope called for justice. And we deliver that by building a country where people have opportunity and security. If you see division, look again. Millions are benefiting. The applause grows louder. Hostin doesn't respond. The air in the studio is thick with tension. The friendly applause from earlier has faded, replaced with a stillness, like a calm before the next wave. The hosts sit straighter now, their questions sharper, their smiles tighter. But Leavitt, in her elegant blush-pink suit, stays unshaken. Her words are calm, but her eyes reveal a fire, ready for whatever comes next. Joy Behar leans in again, her tone skeptical and familiar. Karoline, you defend Pope Francis, but he openly opposed immigration policies like Trump's wall. How do you reconcile your faith with a president whose stance seems to go against what the Pope preached? Leavitt doesn't flinch. Joy, Pope Francis called for mercy, and President Trump shows it, by protecting Americans. Strong borders reduce crime, stop drug trafficking, and protect working families. At the same time, we've created millions of jobs, including opportunities for legal immigrants. That's not just policy, it's compassionate responsibility. And that's the faith I follow. The audience applauds softly. Several people nod in quiet agreement. Leavitt. As a Catholic, I respect his efforts, and I believe the Church will keep growing on a solid foundation. His death isn't a chance to reverse, it's a reminder to live faith courageously. The audience erupts, not just clapping, but cheering. A few stand. The hosts glance at each other. Hostin leans back, momentarily disarmed, searching for a new angle. But Whoopi isn't done. Whoopi Goldberg, with her brows furrowed, leans forward, her voice cutting through the applause. Karoline, you talk about respect, but let's get real. Americans are drowning in bills, working 2 jobs. They don't have time to care about a pope in the Vatican. He's just a symbol. He doesn't change their lives. Trump does. Isn't that what really matters? She's baiting her, turning the Pope into a luxury in a world of necessities. The audience stills, waiting. Leavitt doesn't flinch. She meets Whoopi's gaze with an icy calm. Leavitt, if symbols didn't matter, you wouldn't be wearing one on your chest, she says, eyes briefly flicking to Whoopi's necklace, a silver cross. The room tightens with tension. The Pope wasn't just a symbol. He reminded people that dignity doesn't come from money or politics, but from purpose. Americans do care. That's why millions are grieving. The studio is dead quiet, the gravity settling in. Then a slow ripple of applause breaks through. Joy Behar, voice edged with sarcasm, tries to regain control. Fine, Karoline. So tell us, do you really believe Trump's America reflects Catholic values? Compassion? Inclusion? Because a wall and tax cuts don't exactly scream gospel to me. Leavitt, her voice rising like a crescendo, replies, Joy, compassion without responsibility is chaos. Inclusion without order is injustice. Trump protects Americans, builds jobs, and helps the poor by lifting the economy. That's compassion in action, not just speeches, but results. Another round of claps. Louder. Now, some cheers. The co-hosts shift uncomfortably. Sarah Haynes, softer, more cautious, steps in. Karoline, no one doubts your conviction. But don't you think there's a moral tension between Trump's rhetoric and the church's teachings? Leavitt's smile returns, gentle but sharp. There's no tension, Sarah, there's just complexity. Faith isn't about hiding from hard truths. It's about facing them and still doing what's right. That's what Pope Francis taught, and that's what I try to live every day. This time, the applause isn't just loud, it's thunderous. The camera lingers on the panel, stone-faced, recalculating, and on Leavitt, radiant in blush pink, a symbol herself now. Not just defending her beliefs, but turning the table. The segment ends not with resolution, but with a chilling realization. Karoline Leavitt isn't just surviving the ambush, she's winning the room. Leavitt doesn't blink. She rises, slow and deliberate, her heels clicking softly against the floor. The room seems to hold its breath. Karoline Leavitt. An empty symbol? Her voice, though calm, crackles with fury. The man you're mocking spent his life lifting the forgotten, challenging corrupt systems, preaching mercy to the broken. If that's empty to you, maybe it's because you've stopped listening to what matters. The audience is frozen. Even the cameraman hesitate, unsure if they should zoom in or pan wide. Leavitt continues, her voice rising like a sermon, each word delivered with surgical force. Pope Francis wasn't some idealist in a robe. He tackled financial corruption in the church when no one else would. He faced the mafia, stood with migrants, spoke truth to power. And yes, he reminded us that compassion without courage is meaningless. The audience erupts, the energy snapping like a live wire. Cheers, some shouts of, "That's right." Leavitt turns to Joy, her eyes sharp, unyielding. You say people will forget him next week? No, Joy. They'll remember him every time they see a leader stand for the voiceless. They'll remember him when a child finds shelter, when an addict finds hope, when a nation demands justice over noise. Joy leans back, momentarily silent, lips pursed. Her smirk now a scowl. Leavitt doesn't stop. To those who say I'm out of step with my faith, I say this. Being Catholic means wrestling with hard truths. It means holding power accountable, not hiding from uncomfortable conversations. I can honor the Pope and still support a president who gives working families a fighting chance. That's not hypocrisy. That's reality. The studio is thunderous. The audience is on its feet. Sonny Hostin, jaw tight, tries to interject but can't find the gap. Whoopi's stare falters, her arms crossing in silent defeat. Sarah Haynes looks down at her cue cards, her hands trembling slightly. Leavitt sits back down, composed, victorious. The hosts look shaken. Their ambush has turned into a public unraveling. The woman they tried to corner has turned their own stage into a pulpit, and the crowd into believers. And just like that, the tide of the show changes. This wasn't just an interview. It became reckoning. Whoopi Goldberg raises her hand, trying to steady the storm. But the crowd won't calm. Not yet. Their cheers crash over her words like thunder on a rooftop. A moment ago, it was their show. Now it's Karoline Leavitt's courtroom. Whoopi's voice finally slices through the noise, stern, almost pleading. Whoopi. Okay, we hear you. But Karoline, let's be honest. How do you reconcile a pope who welcomed migrants and spoke against walls with a president who built them? It's a loaded grenade lobbed with calculated timing. But Karoline doesn't flinch. She steps into the blast, unshaken. Karoline Leavitt, her voice low but searing. Walls don't just keep people out, they keep chaos out. They protect. They give structure, not rejection. Pope Francis believed in order and compassion. That's not a contradiction, it's balance. He called for mercy, and Trump delivered safety. That's not ignoring his legacy, it's honoring it in our way. The audience is still, listening, processing. She turns slightly, now facing not the hosts, but the people watching at home. Karoline, you don't have to agree with everything Trump says. I don't. But don't let noise convince you that action means hate, or that faith means weakness. Pope Francis didn't preach easy answers. He preached courageous love. And that's what I try to bring to every room, even one like this. The camera zooms in. Her eyes shine, not with tears but clarity. Leavitt breathes in, then delivers the final soul-punching line. If loving your country, defending the forgotten, and honoring a man who gave his life to God makes me controversial, then so be it. I'll carry that cross. There's a second of silence. Then, boom, the studio erupts again. Louder than before, a chorus of voices clapping, shouting her name. Someone in the back waves a tiny American flag. A man near the aisle shouts, "That's what we need." Joy Behar shifts in her seat, clearly rattled. Her fingers tapping a nervous rhythm against the table. Sonny Hostin leans back, quiet now, her earlier frost thawed by the heat of the moment. Whoopi exhales, her attempt to steer the narrative having failed. Her eyes flick to the producer as if to say, cut to break, now. But the audience won't let go. Karoline Leavitt stands alone at center stage, undaunted, unwavering. What was supposed to be a media ambush has become a national moment, the kind that sparks debate, headlines, and legacy. The camera pans back just in time to catch Whoopi's attempt at deflection. Her smile is tight, her tone trying for levity but straining under the weight of the moment. Whoopi Goldberg, voice laced with tension. All right. That was impressive, she says, laughter forced. Karoline, you've made your point, now let's talk about something more practical, like Trump's tax policies, okay? It's an obvious pivot, a lifeline thrown into choppy waters. But Karoline, Leavitt doesn't take the bait. She stays standing, not to boast but to finish what she started. Karoline, calm yet commanding. Whoopi, before we talk about taxes, let's remember the core. The compassion Pope Francis championed, that's the foundation. And it lives in Trump's economic vision, cutting taxes, slashing red tape. Those weren't just numbers, they were opportunities, dignity, mercy through work. That's what justice looks like when it meets reality. Her voice slices clean through the studio fog. The crowd erupts again, a rising wave of applause as, if they're cheering not just the words but the clarity they've been starved for. Whoopi tries to interject, but she's drowned out. Joy Behar lurches forward, grasping for control. Joy flustered. Karoline, that's a way of, Leavitt lifts her hand, not angrily, just decisively. Karoline, not a way of saying, Joy, it's the truth. Trump's economy lifted up the forgotten. That's not opinion, that's the result. That's exactly what the Pope fought for. Joy's mouth tightens. Her smirk dissolves into a frown. The audience isn't with her anymore. Sonny Hostin and Sarah Haynes stay silent, their posture stiff, their fire dimmed. This wasn't the exchange they planned for. Karoline finally takes her seat, a victor, not retreating, just resting, her poise untouched. Her message was delivered with unwavering clarity. On social media, the fallout begins instantly. Within minutes, X is ablaze, clips circulate, headlines emerge, hashtags trend. Karoline on The View, Pope and Policy, Respect, the Faith One user posts, Karoline Leavitt schools, the view on respect. Defends the Pope's legacy like a warrior. Take notes, Joy Behar. Another writes, she walked calmly, walked out legendary. Whether you agree or not, that's how you defend your faith. Verified accounts, influencers, politicians, even news outlets join the storm. Supporters call it a masterclass. Critics scramble to spin. But one thing is certain. Karoline Leavitt's moment has gone far beyond the studio. It's now a national conversation, and it's only just begun. The post racks up thousands of likes within hours. Conservatives hail her as a rare voice of conviction in a media landscape they view as hostile to faith. She said what we've all been thinking, one user comments. Another calls her a lioness of the right. A Catholic priest shares her clip, captioning it, "This young woman honors the Pope's heart. She's a beacon for devout youth." #Surge. Karoline versus The View. Honor the Pope. Faith, not fear. Clips of her speech circulate rapidly, picked up by faith-based pages, conservative influencers, and even international media. The image is powerful. A lone woman, unwavering, defending the legacy of a spiritual giant in the lion's den of mainstream TV. But the left strikes back, fiercely. A progressive influencer tweets, Karoline Leavitt's sanctimonious act on Ion. The View is just Trump propaganda in pearls. She's too far right to understand the Pope's inclusive vision. The response ignites a digital firestorm. Critics accuse her of twisting Pope Francis's message to fit the MAGA narrative. She's weaponizing religion, one commenter writes. Faith doesn't mean following Trump blindly. But for every critic, 10 more defenders rise. Karoline's supporters flood timelines, amplifying calls for respect, reposting her speech with words like courage, grace, and conviction. In minutes, the online battle mirrors the studio's earlier intensity. And just like on the stage, Leavitt's message holds the high ground. As the noise rages online, Karoline steps away from the spotlight. The camera, if it were still rolling, would catch her alone, not in retreat, but reflection. She exhales. Her thoughts drift, not to trending hashtags or news alerts, but to the moments that shaped her. The heat of the televised battle had been real, but deeper still was the ache. In her chest, the grief of losing Pope Francis, a spiritual father whose words once lit the path when she felt lost. She thinks back to St. Anselm College, where a younger Karoline sat late into the night at a small wooden desk. A desk lamp flickering, papers stacked beside an open book. Laudato Si, Pope Francis's encyclical on protecting the earth. He wrote not just about the planet, but about dignity. About compassion in action. About how justice starts with the forgotten. For Karoline, those words weren't political. They were personal. They carved something into her soul, and they stayed with her. That night in her dorm room, she didn't know she'd one day face down America's most watched daytime show. But she felt the stirrings of something fierce inside her, a calling not just to believe, but to act. Now that calling had collided with the moment, the view, the Pope, Trump, faith, fire, and somehow she had stood her ground. Karoline Leavitt isn't just trending. She's transforming into something more, a flashpoint, a fighter, a symbol. And her battle is far from over. I felt like he was speaking directly to me, she recalls, her voice softening, her eyes bright with memory. It was Laudato Si, Pope Francis's encyclical, that first cracked open her understanding. Faith, she realized, wasn't confined to churches or whispered prayers. It was bold, practical, action-driven. It demanded courage. That belief only deepened years later, when she watched his 2025 Easter homily, sick and frail, broadcasting from the Vatican. Pope Francis's voice trembled, yet every word landed like thunder. Peace in Gaza, a world beyond hate. Karoline, then stationed in the Trump campaign's digital war room, had paused everything to listen. Even now, she can recall the chills. He was so weak, she whispers. But the fire in his words, It felt stronger than anything I'd ever heard. That homily didn't just move her. It lit a flame inside her. A fire she would carry all the way to that moment under studio lights, when The View tried to twist his memory into something political and hollow. When news of Pope Francis's death broke, Karoline didn't run to cameras. She fell to her knees in her Washington, D.C. apartment. Modest, still lined with campaign papers and Catholic texts, she lit a small candle and knelt before an altar. A statue of the Virgin Mary looked over her. She whispered, "I feel like I've lost a guide." The grief was real, so was the silence. But in that stillness, she felt something stir, a connection beyond life and death. It was as if Pope Francis was still urging her forward, reminding her that now, more than ever, she had to live the truths he taught. "I prayed for strength," she says, her voice low but unwavering. Strength to defend what he believed in, especially knowing how The View would try to smear his legacy. That same night, she opened her X app and typed, "Pope Francis was a light of compassion. We must live his spirit." 7 words. They traveled across timelines, devices, borders, igniting something far greater than a trending hashtag. Thousands liked and reshared it. Some added prayers, others added pledges, but all felt the gravity of her message. By the time she walked into the studio, she wasn't alone. She carried with her the silent support of thousands and the quiet strength of a pope who'd shown her how to lead through service. What followed, the clash, the confrontation, the viral eruption, wasn't just political. It was deeply spiritual, a modern crusade in a media arena. Karoline Leavitt didn't just hold her ground. She forged new territory, unapologetically conservative, unshakably Catholic. A 27-year-old voice rising against the storm of mockery, speaking not just for herself, but for a movement. The post-View Karoline was different, not just a campaign spokesperson, not just a culture warrior. She had become a symbol of resistance to the media's cynical framing of faith, a defender of tradition in a time of relentless change, a spokeswoman not just for Trump, but for millions of young conservatives seeking purpose and conviction in a noisy world. And now, after the battle, the question isn't whether she won. It's what she'll do next. She became more than just a guest who stirred the pot. Karoline Leavitt became the headline. From newsrooms to social media feeds, from Capitol Hill to corner pews in small-town churches, her voice echoed through every sphere of America's cultural battlefield. Within hours of her on-screen clash, the media frenzy ignited. Fox News led the charge with open arms. Karoline Leavitt taught The View a lesson in respect, a primetime commentator declared, beaming. They called her a bold new standard-bearer, a young woman unafraid to fuse faith with politics. Their homepage lit up with phrases like conservative hero and champion of the faithful. CNN, in contrast, took aim. Leavitt aggressively clashes with The View, dodging substantive questions, their headline read. One analyst branded her overzealous, accusing her of using faith as a shield for Trump's more divisive stances. They questioned her sincerity, her motives, everything except her impact, which was undeniable. But in Catholic corners, a different narrative bloomed. The National Catholic Register wrote with reverence, "She is the voice of young Catholics unafraid to challenge secular media." To them, she wasn't just defending Trump, she was defending the Pope, a martyr to the mockery, a symbol of conviction. These polarized headlines weren't just reactions. They were reflections of a fractured nation, a nation now debating not just politics but the soul of its faith through the lens of a 27-year-old firebrand. Within the Trump administration, the reaction was swift and celebratory. President Trump himself took to X, typing in bold, "Karoline Leavitt is a star." She silenced The View and defended our faith, proud to have her on the team. The post went viral, millions of views, thousands of replies. Karoline wasn't just a spokesperson now, she was a movement. Sebastian Gorka picked up the drumbeat. On his radio show, "She didn't just defend Pope Francis," he thundered. She defended America's soul against the liberal media. Other Trump allies followed suit, campaign strategists, surrogates, officials, amplifying her moment into a media megaphone. Clips of her words, once meant for a single studio audience, now coursed through timelines, campaign ads, and sermons. Her rise wasn't just political, it was spiritual, cultural, generational. As press secretary, Karoline seized her momentum with precision. She stood at podiums with grace and fire, delivering briefings that didn't just defend Trump's policies, but reframed them as acts of moral urgency. She pointed to tax cuts as pathways to dignity, regulatory slashes as acts of mercy. In Catholic communities across America, she shared her story, not as a politician, but as a believer. She described kneeling in grief the night Pope Francis died. She spoke of his teachings as her compass, of how compassion could exist in the hardest places, even politics. Gen Z listened. Thousands showed up to hear her speak, not because she was slick, but because she was real. They saw someone like them caught in the storm of ideology, but holding tight to values that seemed to slip further away in modern discourse. And for many, young conservatives, disillusioned, Catholics, women of faith, Karoline Leavitt became more than a press secretary. She became a role model, North Star. Her clash on The View was never just about a TV segment. It was the spark of something larger, a fire that swept across social divides, igniting conversations in schools, churches, campaign rooms, and dinner tables. She had walked onto that set with grief still fresh in her chest. She walked off a cultural flashpoint. Karoline Leavitt didn't just silence The View, she gave voice to a generation. Karoline Leavitt didn't just appear on a talk show, she sent a message that echoed through the soul of a fractured nation in the midst of grief over Pope Francis's passing. She stepped into a storm of mockery and turned it into a stage for strength. Her powerful response, firm but never hateful, proved that faith still has a place in politics, not as a relic of the past, but as a torch lighting the path forward. Her speech that day wasn't just a defense, it was a declaration. She reminded millions that dignity, justice, and compassion, the very values Pope Francis embodied, can live within conservative ideals. That job creation isn't just economics, it's human dignity. That national security can be compassion for the vulnerable. That faith isn't weakness, it's strength under fire. In a world where young people are told to choose between relevance and religion, Karoline Leavitt became the bridge. To conservative Gen Z, she became a symbol. Clips of her speech flooded. Timelines. Quotes from her interviews turned into TikTok soundbites, Instagram reels, X threads. One college student put it best. Leavitt showed me we can be devout and strong. Schools, youth groups, Catholic associations, they all reached out. They saw in her what many had longed for. A voice that didn't shrink from faith, but stood taller because of it. She wasn't just defending Pope Francis, she was defending every young Catholic who ever felt mocked for believing. Her story touched something deeper, a reminder that authenticity is rebellion in an age of cynicism. When Joy Behar sneered, calling the Pope just another politician in a white robe, Leavitt didn't lash out, she invoked truth. She spoke of the Pope's work during the pandemic, his efforts in Gaza, and his call for mercy over division. And she did it not with fury, but with faith. This moment became more than politics. It became a cultural turning point. The backlash was loud, but the support was louder. Even as headlines on X tore her apart or raised her high, Karoline stayed grounded. She prayed before that show. She walked in not to fight, but to stand. And stand she did, for those who feel their values are under siege, for those tired of being told their faith makes them small-minded, for a generation looking for truth that doesn't compromise and compassion that doesn't retreat. Karoline Leavitt showed America that you can face insults without losing grace, that you can challenge the media without abandoning morals, that you can be young, faithful, and fearless. Her story is more than just a viral moment. It's a reminder That in the face of polarization, courage still matters. That respect can win over mockery. That faith, when lived authentically, can move nations. So wherever you are, whether in a classroom, a newsroom, or just scrolling late at night, remember Karoline Leavitt's lesson. Live boldly, defend what's sacred, and in the storm, stand. Subscribe to the channel to follow her journey, because this is just the beginning. We'll see you in the next.